Okay, here's the second bonus video, which is about proving part of the associativity of composition. And this is part of the extra stuff because it's not as important as understanding the essence of composition result. But I also can't help myself. I mean, it is an important result, and I really like going through proofs of things like this. So, I mean, if you want, you can just read it. I mean, you should read it. It's part of your reading. But if you want to just read the proof, then I'm not going to add much to that except some narration. So that's why this is optional. But I find it really fun to go through proofs of little things like this. And you can see the thoughts that go into it rather than just the symbols in the video. One thing I like about things like this is we sort of think, if you look at the pictures that go with composition, like these pictures we've been drawing where we just mush things together, it feels kind of obvious, right? It feels kind of obvious that if you take what are these called? U and T and S. If you take U, T, S, and you've got these blobs, and U links up things in a certain way, and T links up things in a certain way, and S links up things in a certain way, it really does feel obvious that composition would be associative. That if you first compose these two and mush these diagrams together to get sort of paths from here to there, and then mush the resulting diagram with this one, it feels like that should be the same as if you mushed all of this together and then mushed the result with that, right? It just feels intuitive. Both ideas just represent sort of running paths from the beginning somehow to the end, right? You would include something in the, maybe you could call it triple composite with no parentheses, just this. Oh, sorry, backwards. You would include a pair in the triple composite if and only if there's a path linking all the way through from beginning to end. So it feels like the triple composite is a thing, which it's not right now. It's not defined. We haven't defined anything called, term, circle, term, circle, term. That just hasn't been defined. But we have defined. You see what I mean? Like when we introduced the grammar, we said if you take a term and you put a composition symbol in another term, then the result is a term. And then we said what that means. That means this. But we never defined what it means to put three things, three terms with two composition symbols like that. That was never defined. But this is defined, and this is defined. So formally, they are different right now. They could be different. If the definition here were something different, then it totally could be. Like there exist non-associative binary operations, So just because we've got a binary operation doesn't automatically mean that it makes sense to talk about this. So we're stuck with parentheses, even though it feels obvious when we look at the meaning that these are associative. So I really enjoy these kinds of proofs where we link up the formalism with what is so clear to see in the picture. I mean, I guess they're all like that, but I just feel like this one is especially. So what I've written here is one of the two inclusions in the equality. And I'm only going to go through this one inclusion. I'm actually going through the inclusion that isn't in the notes, although the two inclusions have pretty much similar proofs. So let me put, this is kind of sloppy, but let me put a better version of this picture here, just to help us keep track of the names of the many variables that are showing up. So here we've got U, then T, then S, and U is going to be a bunch of links here, T is a bunch of links, and S is a bunch of links. And I'm just going to fill in information as it comes along in the proof, just so I have a nice visual. So now I'm going to say consider any, because I'm proving an inclusion, right? So universal generalization. So consider anything in the left-hand side here. Okay, and I don't know if you can hear all of my stomach sounds through the microphone. My microphone is attached to my shirt. So I never listened to a recording, one of my own recordings long enough to see if you can hear that. But I'm sorry if you can. I'm just hungry now, so that's going to keep happening. Oh, there's one. Okay, so consider any thing in here. Things in here are always in the form of pairs. So I can do this. So I could say consider any like z in this thing, but then I'd be stuck trying to use the full non-shorthand definition. And that's just an extra step with another existential instantiation on top of the one that I'm already going to have to deal with. That's super annoying. So as you have seen, let me show you where you have seen. As you have seen with proving that Cartesian products are subsets of things, we can say things like consider any z in the Cartesian product, and then we have to deal with an extra existential instantiation, this get. But you've seen before that we have a shorter way of writing this, which is just a convention where we kind of skip past that initial part and we just say consider any, and then we write this thing in the form of a pair to begin with. And that's something we can do because this is known to be a set of pairs. Cartesian product is known to be a set of pairs. One way to know is to look at the definition, at least the shorthand version of the definition. There it is, here. And you can see the Cartesian product is a set of pairs. Well, it's the same deal with composition. Back here, looking at the shorthand version, you can see that it is a set of pairs. And of course, this is something you can prove, not just observe. But the point is, I can skip some of the repetitive steps by saying consider any, and then let me call it x, y in there. Maybe I'll regret that naming choice. So let's see. X sort of lives back here in my picture that I have in my head, or that I have on the board here, and y sort of lives at the end here, right? Maybe that's not such a good name. I'd rather have like the naming go x, y, z, w, something like that. So how about I call this xw. And now I imagine that x is some dot sitting here, and w is some dot sitting here. Now, since this is in a composite, I can apply the definition of composition. So then we can get a middleman. Okay, where's the middleman going to sit? It's going to sit in the range of u, also known as the, it's going to sit in the, it's going to sit in the range of u, and it will also sit in the domain of S composed with T. That's where the middleman will be. So here. So how about I call that middleman y? So we can get some y such that xy is in u. That's me forming this link here. We're not forming it, but arguing that it exists. And yw is in S composed with T. So that means there's a link y to w. Now if there's a link y to w along the composite S composed with T, that means there's a middleman, right? There's somebody here. So that's using the definition of composition. So now we can get, so now I'm going to use the definition of composition on this. Some, let's call it z, such that the pair yz is in T, boop, and the pair ZW is in S, boop. Okay, now what's my goal is to show, so I've unpacked everything as much as possible, I think, so I'm focusing on my goal. My goal is to show that the pair XW is in the right-hand side, right? So let's do goals in green. Goal XW is in there. So that means I want to find a middleman for this kind of membership in a composition. So I want some, let's call it smiley face, such that X smiley face is in U and smiley face W is in S composed with T. What? Isn't that exactly what I... okay, mistake on my part. That's not my goal. That's what I started with, right? My goal is to prove that the pair XW is in there. Sorry. Okay, I just need to change this part. The goal still is to find a middleman, but for this composition. So S composed with T composed with U. So I need to find a smiley face so that X smiley face is in T composed U and smiley face W is in S. Okay, so look at the goal, look at the picture. Who's the smiley face? Who do you think is the smiley face? There might be more than one smiley face, but I think in this picture there's only one thing that can play that role, and that's Z, right? The pair ZW is in S. There it is. So smiley face identified. Z might work and be able to fill the job of smiley face here. So we already have ZW in S, right? So if Z is going to fill that job, then this part is a go. What about this? Do I have X comma Z in this composition? Well, for that I need a middleman, right? So I need something so that X comma that something. Okay, let's break that down. So for this, let's use blue for this sub goal. To get this to work, I'm going to need, let's call it flower. You know, I could just use variables here, but sometimes it's fun when you know something is a placeholder and it's temporary. Sometimes I like to just put random symbols. So I need some kind of thing, let's call it flower, so that X comma flower is in U and flower comma smiley face is in T, right? So we already have decided that we think that Z is going to play the role of smiley face, right? So we think maybe Z will work here. Can you find something to fill the job of the flower? There's only one thing in sight that can do it, and that is Y, right? X comma Y is in U, and Y comma Z, the thing that we think should play the role of smiley face, is in T. All right, so now we know what to do. Let me get this stuff out of the way. So now we point out, so now Y is playing the role of flower, since XY is in U and YZ is in T, we have XZ is in, and now just look at this. Pair XY is in U, pair YZ is in T. Don't you just want to say is in U composed T? But no, it's T composed U. Isn't that so annoying? Okay. So we have that. Now, since xz is in T compose U, and zw is in S, we have xw is in, and now don't you just want to say this compose that? But no, it's S compose T compose U. Okay, obnoxious, but we are done. So we did it. The goal was we considered any xw in there, and we showed that it's in there. So we implemented the plan and the goal. All right, so that proves one inclusion, and then you have to do the other inclusion. But as you can imagine, it's not so different. All right, that's all for today. So I'll talk to you on Monday.